so it's just gone past, and we have quite a packed schedule today, so we'll try and keep to time. So welcome everyone to your first session of the day. Thank you for being here. So this panel that you've chosen is titled Bearing Witness, the Future of Holocaust Memory Through Immersive Technology, and it's a presentation hosted by East City Films. So I'm just going to introduce Darren, and then he's going to take over the presentation, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So Darren Emerson is a multi-award winning immersive artist and the co-founder of London production company East City Films. Over the last 10 years, his pioneering storytelling work in VR has been recognised for its originality, technical excellence, and its ability to reach delighted audiences. His dedication to this craft has been seen in the development of his work from early 360 films, Witness 360, and Indefinite, onto the multi-award winning room-scale documentaries Common Ground in 2019, In Pursuit of Repetitive Beats 2022, and Letters from Drancy 2023. His work is noted for its hybrid approach to the medium of VR, utilising a wide range of techniques and styles to create experiences that fuse technical prowess with a transcendent storytelling that is profoundly humanistic. And just to let you know that we do have some of these VR experiences on display. They're not in this building though, so they are back through the arts building. That we've popped signs all the way, so it's quite a smooth trajectory there. If you do want to do this, you need to sign up just so that Darren and his team know how many people are coming at once, and you can do that via the reception desk, and they'll give you a slot. So I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Nice and early. So yes. I don't know whether to stand or sit. I feel like sitting because everyone else is sitting. Today I wanted to talk about the intersection of memory, technology and storytelling, specifically how immersive experiences can preserve and transmit Holocaust narratives in ways that resonate deeply with contemporary audiences. So, as Kate said, my name is Darren Emerson. I have a production company in London for the last 20 years called East City Films. And for the last 10 years of that, we have focused predominantly on XR. It used to be 360 video, then it was VR, then it was AR, and now we're calling it XR, which is the catch-all term. And our experiences deal with complex social and historical themes. And we like to push the edge of what storytelling can be, blending theatre, film, music, gaming, and immersive technology to create experiences that move people both emotionally and sometimes, if it's room scale, physically. Our work is purpose-driven. We believe that narrative, when built around presence, has the power to shift perspectives. We're creating what we call living documentary experiences. And you can see some posters of some of our previous work on the screen. Whether that's about a survivor of the 7/7 bombings, a very early piece called Witness 360-77, residents facing eviction and gentrification in Common Ground, or a generation seeking out the thrills of a DIY dance movement in Acid House, which is In Pursuit of Repetitive Beats, which is on at the Barbican as we speak. All of that work is very much centered around ideas around community. I feel that it is deeply humanistic, and it seeks to find the bestness even sometimes in the face of the worst. So I'm honored today to be talking about a partnership between East City Films and the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center that led to the creation of a series of VR films called The Journey Back that tell the incredible story of three female survivors of the Holocaust. The projects, the films here that you can see, address the urgent need to preserve testimonies of the last living Holocaust survivors using state-of-the-art technology to create emotional and educational storytelling experiences that can find new audiences. The project was never just about recording memory. It was about re-experiencing it, guided by the women who lived it. Our goal was to allow people to step with care into living history and to create experiences that bring Holocaust testimony to new audiences. So the project comprises of 3 films, Letters from Drancy, Walk to Westerbork, and Escape to Shanghai. And they center around these incredible ladies, Marion Deichmann, Rhodey Glass, and Doris Fogel. Each film is guided by the survivor themselves, and you are present in real-world and metaphorical spaces, locations and environments that are important to their story. Be that a childhood home, cafes, the nighttime streets of Paris, internment camps, or the beaches of Normandy. The audience accompany and bear witness to their stories, at times oscillating between being the observer and the observed. The title, The Journey Back, which is the collective title of these 3 films, speaks both of a literal and an emotional return to places that shape their stories and back to the moments that define them. What makes these stories particularly compelling is they reflect lesser known, lesser told dimensions of the Holocaust. In particular, Marion's story is really about the separation of Marion and her mother in occupied Paris, and that she's taken in by the French resistance. Rhodey's is the story of the Dutch Jewish experience, being taken to Westerbork internment camp and then being held as prisoners of war. And Doris's story takes us all the way to Shanghai, where she went with her family and stayed throughout the war. They're stories of survival through separation, exile, and endurance, not through the liberation of the camps, but through the resilience to rebuild. So I would like to just show you a compilation of the trailers of all 3 films, about 3 minutes long, one after the other, so you get a sense of these pieces.
My mother was everything to me. She was my world.
This is the place where I last saw my mother before she was taken away.
All those memories, all those passages in your life.
Allied naval forces began landing Allied armies this morning on the northern coast.
They just don't evaporate. They're within you. And you have to learn how to live with it.
My 5th birthday is the last birthday that I really enjoyed. We used to walk down the street on Sundays and meet up with our families, and then all of a sudden you don't see them anymore. My mother was holding my hand. She kept saying, "We're almost there, we're almost there." We really didn't know where we were going, what we were getting into. Nobody knew or thought that they were going to be killed. When I say we were liberated eventually, we were liberated from German oppression, but we weren't liberated from our emotions and from the suffering. And it always stays with you.
I am one of the last survivors that can tell her story firsthand. I think everybody realized if we can't get out now, we will never get out. My aunt and uncle were able to secure passage for us to the only place in the world that took refugees without a visa or an affidavit, Shanghai. We really didn't know for the first 5-6 years how bad things were in Germany. I feel very lucky for the life that I have had that could have so easily been taken from me.
So, as an artist working in this medium, one of the questions myself and my producer Dan over there is asked quite a lot is, why VR? Why are you making this in VR? Why is it not a book, a film, or some other medium? Well, the easiest answer is that that's the medium that we work in, but the other reason is that we really believe that VR is a uniquely powerful medium, and it has its own unique affordances. Some of that is obviously immersion, agency, presence, and when all of those things are combined and crafted in the service of narrative, the storytelling can offer audiences experiences like no other. For Holocaust Memorial in particular, it offers unrivaled presence and intimacy, the felt sense of actually being there. Unlike traditional media, VR doesn't just show, but it tells and it immerses. On screen are a few of those affordances which I mentioned. Embodied empathy for us is where VR allows the viewer, the audience, to occupy space within the story and not just observe it, changing the audience's role from passive to present, which, standing in a place, hearing the voice of somebody beside you, turning your head to follow a moment. It fosters a deeper emotional connection with the survivor. Spatial memory is, for us, it is believed that the brain retains information better when tied to spatial experiences. In VR, locations become lived memory. Walking through a space like Drancy or a childhood street in Amsterdam makes those places personal and visceral, not abstract. This reinforces historical reality through contextualized space, not just dates and names. Time collapse for us is where VR compresses historical distance. Audiences experience a moment from the 1940s as if it's unfolding around them. This challenges the notion that Holocaust memory is fading. It instead becomes immediate and relatable, and that's particularly for younger audiences. This creates a bridge between generations. Sensory immersion, using spatial sound, 3D environments, abstraction, haptics maybe, or visual detail to activate multiple senses deepens that immersion. For example, hearing of survivors' testimony in a spatial environment creates lasting emotional resonance. These sensory cues build empathy without needing to be overly dramatized. Nuanced narratives, when we approach VR, we play a lot with perspective, and VR allows stories that are quiet, complex, and intimate, and not relying on spectacle. And it gives us a space where the audience and subtler moments can gain weight and time. And the controlled perspectives, we are able to oscillate between observer, a witness, and also putting people into a first-person perspective at times. So that's sort of kind of some of the affordances that VR gives us as storytellers. I wanted to break down the process of making these films for you, for people that are interested in terms of the practicalities and the logistics of it, because I think it's important to kind of share those things for other institutions that may be looking into doing something a little bit like this. The project was created, produced over the course of a year. From winning the tender process with the Illinois Holocaust Museum, we had to win that. We had to bid for it. to final delivery and all the versions and the refinement that we did once we delivered. We kicked off, once we'd won the job, with a budgeting and contracting process, which actually, and 3 months of pre-production, mapping stories, planning interviews, and sourcing archives. By far the most important part of the production process, and I'll come into a little bit more detail on that. Then we went into 5 months of production, filming across multiple countries with a large crew and survivors, and then 5 months of post-production, which sort of kind of straddled that a little bit. Editing, audio design, and of course working in game engine to create environments and stuff like that. The key thing about this project and why it was such a good collaboration with the museum themselves is that they approached it in a very realistic manner. The milestones were set out, the budget was set out, and they knew that it was going to take a year to make. And so we all were heading in the same direction for the same sort of goal. And once they were made, they were ready to fit into the VR gallery at the museum. One of the important things that we needed to ascertain at the beginning of the collaboration with the museum was certain parameters. And when you engage in anything that's very expensive and technically difficult to produce, that is very, very key to know. So they wanted it to be a seated experience. That was one of the prerequisites. That's because they have a gallery at the museum that is already a seated gallery. No controllers. I think interaction in VR when dealing with the Holocaust is maybe a tricky area anyway. You have a lot of interrogation needs to go into what you're doing in terms of interaction and why you would do it. But in a more practical sense, they didn't want to onboard their audiences with controllers and teach them how to do stuff. That just makes the process quite long, and they have volunteers at their museum who are not necessarily technically astute when it comes to like onboarding controllers. Work with the existing setup. The museum in Illinois had already made some VR pieces previously, and they had already bought high-powered PCs and headsets, so we needed to make the work to fit those. A 20-minute duration, that was our sort of limit. I managed to push that for Letters for Drancy to 22 minutes, but that's because, yeah, you know, it was my film. So, but that was because they were running half-hour to 45-minute slots. So they would want to onboard people, get them to watch the pieces, then they would offboard them, and these are all very important parts of that process, and then they could bring in the next people. Probably one of the most important elements, which we'll dive into a little bit more later, is the mobile headset version. So the version at the museum was PC-powered, high-powered VR headsets, but they needed a 360 version that they could take out to schools and be more mobile. And then we were also asked to make orientation films, so small little documentaries that would onboard people. So when you come into the VR experience, there's a screen, you learn a little bit about the subject matter and the ladies, and then a making of film as well. So these were all sort of kind of parameters that that we work to. That pre-production work is that crucial element. It's important to say that we had won the job before we started doing all of this. It wasn't like they had asked us to sort of script it and do all that work beforehand. And I think I'm going to come on to that later as a bit of a bugbear of mine when working with some clients and institutions in terms of their expectations. But the pre-production element for VR is so important. So that encompassed research, scripting, location scouting, storyboarding, and actually doing interviews with the survivors, which would normally be part of the production process. This is to try and figure out the clear narrative beats around and the creative approach. And it was a collaborative process with rounds of feedback. We presented scripts, storyboards, taking advice from the museum, of course, because they are the experts in the room, and considering Holocaust representation and ethical considerations before we kind of set off and making it. Archive obviously is a huge sort of element to it, and there was lots of personal archive in these projects that we could work with. Working with archive in a spatial medium like VR is quite tricky because it's 2D and you're working in a volumetric and 3D space with it. But actually, if you can work out ways of using archive, it can reveal so much about the character narrative, reveal about the history of the places, and it can inform everything, such as colorways, fonts, the 3D elements, the sound design, and adds real texture and dimension to the experience. I mentioned the interviewing, and for me as a creator working in VR, interview is the bedrock of everything that we do. Obviously, in this experience, we were lucky enough to have survivors who were still alive. And, there was a lot of pressure in terms of, these ladies were late 80s, in their 90s when we were making it. And we needed to, the first thing we needed to do was get these interviews. These were long interviews, 2 to 3 hour long interviews in Chicago. And what we do with that, and the process is do these interviews. And then you can see on this timeline, I've kind of like marked stuff like border crossing or fleeing here, and what we do with that is create the story arc, create the narrative flow. And it's a process we do for every VR piece, actually, because we know that if the audio is working in terms of the narrative flow, if you can listen to the experience and it's still compelling, it makes sense, that once you start layering on imagery and all the sort of technical stuff around VR, then it's going to be even better. And again, in terms of collaboration with the museum, it's a great time to stop, give them the narrative, the audio, and get feedback on that because the next stage is the expensive stage. And it's important to be honest with people about that as a production company. We do all that pre-production work, that's all budgeted for, and we do all that work because we know that when it comes to this bit, we're going to be spending quite a lot of money doing it. These are some of the techniques that we used. So 360 video, 360 video on drones as well. Volumetric capture. For those who don't know, that's where you capture people in a volumetric array of cameras, which gives you a 3D model of real people or objects. Motion capture, which is literally capturing people moving for animation. Photogrammetry, game design, as in game engine design. Of course, we were doing video post-production because of the 360 video. We were doing animation, spatial audio. And also, and this is something that's very important to us as a production company, designing how this would be exhibited whilst we're making it. It's kind of no good to kind of make it and then go, oh, where should we put this? What should we do with it? Which is how people made VR sort of maybe 10 years ago. And it was like, oh, we'll put it on a table over there. Actually, no, we were thinking about how this would be exhibited, what the stages of that exhibition would be. And that feeds all the way back into the creative process of when you're making it. One of the things that's interesting, I think, and something I needed to get used to as a really more of a filmmaker originally, and this is something, if you're working with people that are making VR, is that game engine design is a very iterative process. It's very different to filmmaking in many ways. What you'll get is things like gray boxes, which is basically a scene set up in its most basic way. That's to really focus on function, interactions, how things are working, and actually the final look of something, when it looks really good, is really very much at the last stage. And for people that work in a museum or working, and putting on a headset and going, oh, this looks a bit crap, like that could be a bit of a shock. For me as a filmmaker, I'm sometimes like, oh, I wish it looked really good. Like I just want it to look good straight away. But I have to, I've had to learn to be like, chill out. It's going to be fine. It's going to look good, but it needs to work functionally for the audience. So, as I mentioned, 360 video played a big part in this production because we were lucky enough to have 3 survivors with us. And that definitely meant, okay, we're going to go traveling, we're going to go revisit these places, and we're going to take these ladies back, are going to actually like show us these locations. Scenes in 360 video offer a fixed perspective. In VR, we call it 3 degrees of freedom. If you don't know what that means, then 3 degrees of freedom in terms of 360 video is basically the viewpoint of the camera. It means you can look left, right, up, down, but you can't move through the scene. You can't change your perspective. You're fixed to that position. The thing to say about 360 video in terms of any productions that you're doing is to know up front that 360 video is technically demanding. You've got a big crew, you're moving around, and because the camera can see everything, there is a lot of, it's quite a technically demanding shoot with, in the post-production process, a lot of compositing and post-production. And it can be very demanding for people in front of camera. There were some scenes where Marion, you can see here, is talking to the camera, and she's talking directly to the camera because that's the audience as well, and that was quite tricky and tiring. But obviously the advantage of having a collaboration and a really good collaboration with a museum is that they were able to come on this journey with us and help us with the duty of care that we needed to show to these ladies. It's physically demanding. It was travel, long days. And of course, there was an emotional well-being element to it, revisiting painful memories in the locations where they happened. And so, you know, with good preparation and an amazing production team, which I think we had an amazing production team, and Michaela Blitz, who isn't here but is over with the VR nearby, was our producer, and she did an amazing job. And I have to say, like, that picture is taken with Marion looking at this rail car, which she was convinced was the cart that took her mother to Auschwitz, and it was the one single sort of most painful moment of the experience, and she'd never been to Drancy before in Paris, you know, apart from those moments, though, my overriding memory of the whole shoot was one of joy, friendship, and respect. It was a really fun shoot, actually, and lots of laughter, weirdly. So, you know, given the right circumstances, you can kind of achieve what you want, but do it in the right way. I mentioned game engine environments. Game engine for us means either Unity or Unreal Engine. I think probably most people have heard of that. We use Unity. This allows you 6 degrees of freedom. So 6 degrees of freedom is sort of the same as 3 degrees of freedom, but you also have the added ability to move, change perspective, and move through the scene. Game engine environments allowed us to create moments in these films which we couldn't have filmed, of course. Memories kind of reimagined. For instance, there's a scene in Letters from Drancy where Marion describes very brilliantly and very viscerally the experience of hiding in the back of a truck going across the border into occupied France and being stopped by German patrol. And that allowed us to recreate that scene and put you in that position in the truck, and to be able to move slightly in your chair to hide from the sweep of the torch. So it gives you more agency, it gives you more feeling of, and it's really good for first-person perspectives. Of course, there are lots of pretty raw and painful testimonies in these films, and one of the ways we looked to treat those was with animation sequences to tell very sensitive moments with a deft touch, really. Animation here, you can see the use of motion capture to recreate a scene. Again, this is from Letters from Drancy, where she describes her mother being taken by the French militia in an apartment one evening, and the moment that they get torn apart. The process to create this animation in Letters from Drancy was really about allowing there to be sort of kind of space, artistic space, between the rawness of that memory and that testimony and a way of showing it. The hand-drawn style, the sort of delicate soundtrack, allows audiences to face this traumatic moment without sensationalism, but it doesn't hide the pain. It's probably the scene I'm most proud of in the production of the Letters from Drancy in particular. And so, that's one of the techniques that we use, that you can see that is being shown here. We talked about archive earlier. Here are some examples of actually that archive being integrated into the scenes. On the left there, it's game engine, but we're using real-time light to project newsreel and archive into a room. It's meant to represent an abandoned house in Luxembourg where Marion and her mother left. And then on the right here, we're using archive to project images of the location in the past on the actual fabric and the space of where we are. We also do things like matching the old photos with the camera shots. You can see that here, where we can see the bomb damage in this church in Normandy, and it's overlaid. That's, you can use archive in lots of different ways. I mean, we didn't have any interaction in this piece, as I mentioned, but obviously you can use archive as interactive objects as well, picking up papers, newspapers, passports, whatever you wanted to do. There's ways of integrating that archive cleverly. Once it was made, then you've got to start thinking about distribution. Well, actually, I go back on that. You don't start thinking about distribution once it's made, and I said that earlier. So no, you need to be thinking about distribution right at the very beginning. And actually, that's become, in terms of VR and the VR landscape and funding VR and all sorts of stuff, that's something that we look at most. When we're making a project, we need to have a distribution plan straight away. We need to know the audience, and we had a pretty clear idea with this production what was going to happen. So the number one first target was the museum's permanent gallery in Chicago. So you can see some video of the Illinois Holocaust Museum. It's a fantastic museum, lots of really great exhibits, and obviously they have their VR gallery down there, which you'll see some images of. The films play on rotation in the museum, a different film every month. The entry ticket to the museum is $15, and that includes access to the VR gallery. And they tell me that 72% of the museum's total attendance in 2024 went to view the VR. Obviously, there is a capacity issue, so not everybody that can go can do the VR. But it still shows that it's a very popular part of their permanent exhibition. And I think one of the things that's important about that is that it is a permanent exhibition. It's not a sidebar, it's not a kind of special event, it's something that they have invested in, and we can talk about budget later, but they invested in, and they are continuing to show. So that's really, really good. One of the big reasons that they wanted to work with East City Films, I think, is that we have a good track record when it comes to film festivals and awards and stuff like that. And, Letters from Drancy were premiered at the Venice Film Festival. The other films premiered at the South by Southwest. They went to the London Film Festival, Luxembourg. They've played in France, and they've played all over the world. The festival circuit for us in VR is an important part of the ecosystem. It's, it might not be necessarily associated with museum and curation in that sense, but what it does do is it gets press for the work. It finds other interested exhibitors, and it validates the quality and the quality of the films and the medium itself. And importantly, it also those festivals facilitated meaningful interactions between the community and the Holocaust survivors. You can see Marion, who was the star of the show at Venice. We did a panel, and she came up, and basically I just had to be quiet at that point because she was brilliant. And it's the same with Rhodey Glass as well at South by Southwest, holding court and it was brilliant. And people were really moved. People were really moved to watch these films, then come out and meet the actual survivor. A lot of tears, a lot of great moments, and we've been lucky enough to win a few awards for these films, which is really great, and the museum are very, very happy about that. That festival sort of circuit also is mainly, it's prestigious and all that kind of stuff, and it's great. But one of the reasons for doing it is to get the word out and have licensing opportunities. The museum is actively licensing these pieces of work. There's been shown in other museums and art spaces around the world. They continue to be distributed by us at ECity Films, but also the museum, and they have an agent in Europe. And they've just been licensed, actually, last week to the Holocaust Memorial in Miami for 3 years as well. You can see a fly-through here of exhibition that we staged at the Wales Millennium Centre. This is work by our exhibition art director, Fran, and it was quite a big exhibition, but it's important to say that there is flexibility. There are different modalities. It can be smaller. It can, what we're doing here is obviously much, much smaller. So, and so it depends on your budget and the scale of the institution, but, but these things can be licensed. And I think, again, that reinforces the point that the investment in these pieces was not just for a one-off sort of show. It was actually for a legacy, and they are getting licensing money back in from showing these pieces in these different institutions. One of the most important and the best things about these experiences is also that the museum, the Illinois Holocaust Museum, I keep calling them the museum because it's the only museum that we've worked with, but I know that lots of people are from museums, so is that the Illinois Holocaust Museum, it's actually the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. And so they have a real sort of mission in terms of schools and education. And they created what they call mobile VR trunks. So you remember I mentioned the 360 versions. You can see a little image of the headsets in a trunk there. The great thing about this is that the trunks themselves each trunk contains 10 Oculus Quest 2 headsets, educational materials, an iPad, and it's very easy for a teacher to run. So schools will either hire or lease these trunks, and 13,000 students in 2024 across 16 states in the US have seen these films. And it, what it does is it ensures that young people are getting access to these crucial narratives. The evaluation and impact of those is quite significant. As I mentioned, 13,000 students in Illinois and the surrounding states have seen them. The evaluation says that 82% of the students felt more engaged after VR in other Holocaust materials, which I think is quite important. They did the VR and then they were more engaged in the more traditional materials. 94% of students felt they had gained more knowledge and empathy from engaging in VR. 93% felt they had a better understanding of the importance of Holocaust education after the VR. 90% felt they had gained a better understanding of survivor stories through VR than other mediums. 96% of the teachers, and it's probably the more important statistic if it's the teachers and not the kids, is reported more engagement in the classroom, and 100% of those teachers said that they would recommend VR to fellow teachers. And what's important, I think, about that, we often say, working VR for the last 10 years, VR sometimes struggles to find an audience. I've made pieces in 2016 about important issues, I feel like asylum detention in the UK. But, it didn't get an audience. It was hard to get an audience at that time. Those things are changing now. If you're working with a production company that is planning around distribution, understands the process both creatively and logistically, that you can have a lifespan of a project that lasts years and years and years. And that's an important element, and it can find an audience. That audience is never going to be as big maybe as a film, but 13,000 students in 1 year is pretty good. It's about 46,000 people who've seen it. the films in the museum environment. So those are not insignificant numbers, especially when you consider the impact of the actual story and the medium is so strong. I wanted to talk about some learnings and considerations for yourselves in terms of if you want to commission something like this, and also things that we've learned by doing it with the Illinois Holocaust Museum. The first thing to say is like, and I know it sounds like kind of like obvious, but like an open and honest partnership is crucial. That starts with clear expectations around the tender process and schedule, budget, and the scope. I mentioned earlier, you know, often as a company we get people asking us to, oh, will you pitch on this? And the expectation sometimes is that they want you to write the script, do the storyboard, and then decide if they want to work with you. But they won't tell you the budget. And sometimes it's confusing when they don't tell you the budget, because you think, well, you must have a budget. And the budget for VR can be very big. It can be smaller. There's lots of kind of different ways of approaching a technical project. And it's very hard for a company, a creative company, to even approach responding to a brief if you don't know the budget. Sometimes I feel like they're kind of playing their cards close to the chest because they're hoping you're going to go, oh yeah, I could do it for like £1,000 and like, you know, and some sweets. But that's not going to happen. And it just delays the process, because eventually you have to get to that conversation. The other thing is deep mutual learning. We are experts at what we do. We're not experts at the Holocaust. That was the museum's job. The museum gave us all the archive. The museum guided us. When we came up with some creative ideas, at one point, one of our directors for Walk to Westerbork wanted to do an animation sequence where people would be charcoal and it would be like smoke, and they would and the museum were like, smoke is not something that we can be doing for obvious reasons. But that creative team had got carried away. Oh, it's going to look like this, and then of course you go, oh yeah, okay, right, yes. So you know there's that mutual respect, that mutual learning. The way it works in a different way is that anecdotally, the Illinois Holocaust Museum had worked with another production company previously and had been convinced by them to do photogrammetry of a dorm in a concentration camp. Photogrammetry means basically taking thousands of images to create a massive 3D model. They spent a lot of money on it, a hell of a lot of money. We were pretty shocked when we found out. And the experience that they showed us that this was in was a seated experience that you couldn't move around. So it's just a perspective. But they had spent all this money on a volumetric model that they'd captured and spent a lot of money on, and then it wasn't used properly. And that's something that we would flag. They were also told that they couldn't do subtitles in VR, which is not true. You can. Of course you can. So mutual respect and knowing it, you know, what you're good at, what your expertise is. Audience awareness. This is a crucial one with VR, and we say this all the time, no matter what the project. Who is the audience? Where are they? And what is the context? If you're making a piece of VR for, say, policymakers at a big conference, at like a UN conference or something like that, they're not going to sit there for 25 minutes watching a VR piece with a headset on, because they're probably quite busy and they've probably got lots of people want their time. Maybe something that's 5 minutes is going to work better. Can you tell a story that's impactful in 5 minutes? It's challenging, but you know, we have done that before. We made a piece about stroke for the Stroke Association that was shown at Parliament, and that again was 5 minutes long specifically. So you have to think about what your audience is. For the Illinois Holocaust Museum, it was what you saw earlier. It was the VR, it was the film festivals, the gallery. It was 20 minutes long. Exhibition readiness, we kind of talked about that, but like, you know, one of the things you need to know is what hardware you're going to use it on. What VR headset and what the hardware is impacts what you can do in VR. If it's a mobile headset, it changes how we make it because of the power of the headset and what's possible. So we need to know that. What is the onboarding process going to be? What's the staffing? If the institution or the museum doesn't have any like staffing or volunteers, there's no point putting in a very complicated VR piece that's just gonna ruin everyone's day and be really stressful on the ground. So and we've got an example of that at the Barbican. We have a big crew. We're in the pit theatre. It's one where you walk around. It's about acid house. There's fans, haptic vests, projections, wind machines, all sorts of stuff going on in this piece. That would not work in that museum setting. So it's best to know that. Accessibility planning, of course, accessibility in VR is something that people have struggled with, but is becoming very, very prevalent now. Making sure that you have subtitles, that you have provisions for people that are visually impaired or hearing impaired, so that they can also access the content. And then measuring impact, like how are you going to measure impact? And need to know that right at the beginning. I think, sort of lastly, there's a lot here about tech, but really it's not about tech. It's about storytelling. Storytelling is everything. And storytelling is how we connect to people. I want to finish, and I'm going to read this. This is Kelly Zaney, who is amazing. She's the SVP of Education and Exhibitions at the Illinois Holocaust Museum, and she says this. The museum understands connecting with the voices, faces, and transformative power of survivors' stories remains one of the most powerful educational tools and one of the most meaningful ways to combat the hatred we see in our world today. The greatest strength in what has been captured and preserved and merged with revolutionary VR technology is how it can connect with tens of thousands around the world. And today, in an era of resurgent anti-Semitism, we must be ready to meet this moment with the urgency it demands. To educate the next generation, building a bridge from the past to the present, reminding audiences that the conditions that led to the Holocaust continue to thrive in our communities and around the world, and that the stories of survivors serve as a powerful defense against ignorance, indifference, and hate. Kelly is a legend. I love Kelly. So, that's the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. Oh, and just to say and to repeat that the VR experiences, their 360 versions of the VR experiences are in Art Space A, and we're running sessions, so please sign up for those. And yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for that. That was
Thank
super
you.
informative. So I think we have around 40 minutes for questions. So I'm going to open the floor straight away if anyone has any burning questions. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. I'm so happy that I could hear your presentation because I knew this project really well because 2 years ago, when I prepared my book, I did my research at the Illinois Holocaust Museum. Okay. And I did experience the VR with Rodi.
Yeah.
And I found it really interesting. Also, I partly wrote about this project in my book. It's only in Polish, so. Anyways, I want to say that I really like the idea of sketches about this part of the story, as you said, that you couldn't record directly. So I like that you mixed the real story, the real survivor story with these sketches, with this game motions things. And I like the idea with the empty frames in the Holocaust.
In the actual exhibition itself.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive when you enter the space and you see these empty frames. And then you sit on the chair and you like see in this how these empty frames are like in these empty frames appeared the pictures. Yeah. So yeah, I come to this. My question is about the translations.
Yes.
Because when I spoke then with the people in the museum, I had this idea that we wanted to, because I work in the Galicia Jewish Museum in Krakow, and we I thought that maybe we can invite this project to Krakow to show it publicly. But the question is about the translation, because obviously we would need the Polish translation. So how it works, how we can deal with that.
Yeah, I mean it's very straightforward. I mean, it's already in French, German, and Spanish, I believe. So we have versions in that language. There's a transcript, and then you work with people that will translate it into Polish, and then it would be subtitles.
So
Unless you want to revoice it.
it's like on the museum side is the translation thing, or?
No, we produce the translations. So, but the museum obviously, we were showing it in France and Germany, and and then we needed subtitled versions in those languages. So it's actually fairly straightforward to get people, professional sort of kind of translators to translate it. Then we just put those that is translate. There's something called an SRT file, which runs in the background. It's and it's a subtitling file. You get them, all the time, and it's time coded, and basically, the Polish version will just be a version you can select, or it'll be a free. If it's a 360 video version, we'll just send you the Polish 360 video version with embedded time codes. Yeah, so very straightforward and wouldn't cost much to do, really. So don't worry. I mean, honestly, it wouldn't cost that much. Yeah.
Just to follow on from that, actually, I think that's an opportunity to speak a bit more to the tensions around, you said you moved into the space, and obviously in the Illinois Holocaust VR suite, you also have that kind of very performative rail track, right, where the headphones are coming down from the ceiling. Was that part of kind of your design, or was that already there with the...
There's no rail track. No.
Okay, so
That's just a sort of... there is a... in the Illinois Holocaust Museum, they have suspended a rail car in the museum, which is quite close to where the VR exhibition is, so you can kind of see it. Okay, but the computers are just on they're tracks, but they're like kind of like service tech. Yeah. They're holding they're just metal things to hold the PCs that are up there, and then the headphones come down. That is much more, that was just practical about, not wanting lots of cables around and just being able to sit on the chair and put the headset on without having because if you're going to move around, you don't want computers there. I mean, I think the museum, the Holocaust Museum now, the Illinois Holocaust Museum now, if we did these films again, they wanted us to make them for the Vive Pro, which is a PC-powered, I think they would dispense with that now. They would go for something like the Quest 3 or the Pico, something that is mobile, because they are showing them as out in mobile headsets now in schools, and I think they're finding that a lot easier to do. With the PC-powered one, it's just, it's slightly more tricky. You can do more in VR, but you're also tethered to the PC as well. So I think we would also recommend that they did it in mobile headset next time. But I think they felt that they genuinely felt that they had invested in these PCs, so they should basically use them again. Yeah. Actually, in hindsight, I guess it's easier now to use mobile.
Yes.
Hi.
My name is Lisa. I'm from Berlin. Thank you very much for the presentation and all the insights you gave us. My question refers to the impact measurement, and I'm very curious. First of all, how did you measure the impact, and how did you implement it into the tool, or not? I don't know. And then a bit more general, I'm interested if measuring the impact of VR experiences is different than measuring the impact of any other tool, whatever digital tool or even analog tool.
Yeah.
And the third question, also relating to that, is are there ways to measure the impact of VR experiences, not asking the people how did you like it, or do you think it's better than other tools? Because I mean, it's legitimate, but it's also
That's why I said That's why I said, with the thing with the teachers, the kids, I kind of go, oh, well, the kids will probably say what they feel that they meant to say. Well, first of all, as a production company, we are not evaluating. It's the museum that's doing their own evaluations. what we do evaluate stuff. We're running the piece that we're running at the Barbican has a company called I2 Media. It's based out of Goldsmiths College that is doing an evaluation. That takes the form of a survey, really, that happens at the end, and it's kind of optional. It's quite long, actually, and we have some trouble with that in terms of people filling out sort of kind of surveys. There isn't really like you could design something that would be part of the experience that would exist in VR, where you could kind of do that survey in VR, but there isn't anything necessarily in terms of like monitoring. I mean, there's like things like eye tracking and stuff like that, but I feel that there's an ethical consideration with that anyway, and I wouldn't want to bring that into our experiences necessarily. And you could measure heart rate and stuff like that, but there isn't anything that would just fundamentally like discover what people thought about it or how they reacted to it within the actual VR itself. So I think it does feel at the moment to be sort of fairly like a rudimentary sort of kind of like survey sort of kind of thing. I don't know, Dan, my producer over there, might have an opinion on that.
I suppose it depends on... Hello.
This is Dan Tucker, everybody.
I suppose it depends on also what you want to measure. Like, what are you really interested in? As you said, like, if the comparison with other media is not interesting, then what are you hoping to get from the audience? Like, the level of engagement, or what they retain, or what they want to do in terms of an onward journey? The survey that Darren's talking about that we're doing at the Barbican has a lot of demographic questions, because the venues all want to know who is the audience coming in. Is it not the same audience that we normally get? So they're really concerned about that. And then the I2 Media is based on a database of other existing immersive projects, which we're kind of being ranked against, and frankly doing pretty well. But it's asking also about levels of engagement and a few questions that are kind of a bit more specific to the medium. I think, Darren's right, you could design something in headset, but actually what we find is that there's this journey that people go on when you craft VR really well, which is if they arrive and they're given the right context and they feel comfortable, they then go in and have a powerful experience, and then afterwards they're always in a kind of contemplative frame of mind where they want reflection, and that's a good time to then do evaluation, rather than within the story. So I think it comes back to like, what is it that you want to know? What is it that you're intrigued in? I mean, I think we can say that stuff we've worked on with public institutions, we have seen great engagement, definitely great engagement. We've seen great retention, like people have remembered a lot of the factual information. And what I think is really important, like from this piece in the museum, the Illinois Holocaust Museum, and a piece that I made years ago for the Imperial War Museum, is that people want to go on an onward journey. It's like what the kids are saying about like wanting to know more or engaging more in Holocaust education. It's really interesting how people come out of a virtual experience, maybe it's obvious, and then go in search of something real that still is in the same story world. They go in search of a real object or a real exhibition or real expertise or real knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm wondering if the assumption that VR is more convincing than other media is scientifically proven. Or if it's. I'm not saying I don't think it's true, but what I observed is that with a very fast development of whatever media and techniques of narratives, whatever, we tend to think the new is better because it's fancier and it's more, and we just go with it and take it because it's new and modern. And I'm sometimes wondering if this is really true, and if a VR film is really more inspiring than watching film in a cinema.
I think the answer is that VR is not trying to replace zone of interest, or Marion Deisman wrote a book that was which we used as the basis of a lot of the sort of kind of VR sort of narrative flow, like because she'd already written a book. that media exists. It's about engagement. I think it's about giving people the opportunity to do something different that engages with them, that isn't the same as the media that they've had on this subject before. I think that's why it kind of stands out. I think there are studies about the impact of VR, and interestingly, as a VR production company, we're often asked to do quite a lot, and this is one of the things about VR. It's like we're asked to fundraise it, we're asked to distribute it, we're asked to make it. We're also asked a lot of the times to legitimize it as a medium and do the research. We're not researchers, we're not academics. There are academics out there doing that work, and a Google search would show up lots of that stuff. I do feel that it's a feeling that the affordances of the medium do have an emotional resonance with people, and I've seen it, literally seen it, people coming out moved in tears, wanting to go on an onward journey, as Dan says. And I think a part of that is it's all about curation as well, and obviously working with a museum like Illinois the curation of the experience is more than just here's a headset, put it on, oh, did you like it, and then you go off. It's about making that a holistic experience that ties everything in, and then it can be a very powerful tool. Do I have hard black and white evidence? No, but I've seen it with my own eyes, so I believe it.
Hi, my name is Clarissa. I'm from the University of Connecticut, and I have first to say thank you very much to my colleague. If you're looking for some of those papers by the researchers that you mentioned, and some about specific trauma-based VR projects, I'd be happy to share papers with you. I didn't write them, but I've read them. A slightly anachronistic question, given how the grant funding in the U.S. has been destroyed. Do you partner on grant proposals, or in response to a grant having been awarded, is that part of the work that you consider partnering with? So I'm just curious if grant funded type of work.
I mean, a lot. This piece was commissioned, so they already had raised the money from donations. They do, a lot of kind of fundraising, and so the budget was fixed. They had an idea of what they wanted to do. Most of our work, though, is grant funded or arts funded or looking for funding in different guises, mainly in the UK, but as part of that, we do a lot of partnering on projects. We're working on something now with a big arts institution in London, which if you come from London, you'll know exactly where that is. But it's it's by the river, and. Well, I can't say any more than that. And part of that process is that we all want to make this thing together, and we need to find the money. And some of the money is being raised over here, some of the money is being raised over there. Some of it is, and we will feed into that. So we because I know why you asked the question, because grant, because
in terms of pushing the technology.
Yeah, so there's different funds. There are sort of funds that are much more sort of kind of narrative based. There are funds that are around tech. Sometimes it's quite tricky if you're trying to get something that that is more of a storytelling VR piece that you want to get to audiences, but you're going for a grant that is very specific on certain types of tech. You feel like you're kind of like trying to angle your way in there to try and like tick the boxes so that you can make it. But we look at all of that, and a good reason to ask that question is that it's a lot of work. Yeah. So to not be paid as a production company, to not be paid to do a lot of work, and for instance, Dan has worked on a UK tour for our VR piece, In Pursuit of Repetitive Beats. the fundraising for that, and we got the fundraising for that through the Arts Council and the BFI, but that took about a year to secure. And now we've been running the tour for like almost a year, and we're coming to the end of it at the end of this year. But, and it was a significant amount. If you're going for significant amounts of money, then there are significant hurdles to jump through. But we do bring that expertise to the table. And if we believe in the project and it's something that we want to do, and we have a good relationship with the partner, then that is definitely something that we do all the time, because often it's the only way. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure how it works in the US as much in terms of grant funding.
Grants that are international. Okay. And then one question, thank you very much for talking about before you get the job. Is it customary in the UK, I know in the US, the creative brief, whether it's mutually crafted before you make the pitch, but is that a normal starting point, having the conversations and having a creative brief?
Yeah, I think normally you would know what the client or was looking for. They say, well, we want to make a VR piece about this. This is the subject. This is maybe in that case these are the contributors, the protagonists.
The various points you staked out that one should know before you can budget, propose.
Yeah, I think. Most of the time, I think sometimes you have to sort of kind of pull people in the direction that you need them to be at. I think sometimes people are looking for answers, but haven't actually given you the questions. Mm-hmm. So, and that can be quite frustrating, especially if they're being quite reticent about sort of kind of being open about it. As I said, it kind of often wastes quite a lot of time. Especially especially around budget, it's just like, if you're open about budget, if you have researched what these things cost and you have a scale, that's due diligence on your part to not expect it to cost 10K, but to know that, Drancy and all those, they're six-figure sums. And when combined, it's quite a large budget. So, but there are different ways of doing it. As a production company, the frustration is to respond creatively to a narrative and a proposal without a budget parameter is very, really hard. If you say that it's if we're thinking it's double what it is, then it doesn't mean that we can't do it. It just means that we need to change the approach. And we need to also consider how we're going to make it, if it's worth us doing it, all that kind of stuff. So it just saves a lot of time. It just saves a lot of time. So normally, those things, we ask for those things. We don't always get them. But the more information, the better. And we with the Illinois Holocaust Museum, how we won the job was to really say, this is how we work. This is how we'll work on this project. This is our past work. And watch it, look how good it is. And you have to watch VR to really understand if it's good or not. And then it's and this is how we would approach this project. And and this is how we would do it. And that was convincing enough. And then at that point, we were right, we're all sitting in a room together. We're all on this journey together. Let's work out the specifics and go on that journey together. We then went away, did all the research, and came back with treatments for each of those films, which luckily they loved, but you had to tweak it and stuff like that. And that's before you've then gone and spent lots of money. So I think that's key. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Darren, for your one.
Oh, hi. Sorry. It's because you're right next there, and I was like.
Just kind of ganged up on you now.
Yeah.
Questions. I hope not.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your really inspiring and wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
I would like to go a step back before it enters the classroom. Are there any supporting materials you're aware of that the museum provides for teachers and educators who use your technology? And I can see it's a very emotional experience. Is there a guideline that's been developed to use it with very young pupils? I was quite surprised to see that at that age because it's quite evident, and I can see also, I'm teaching students in London, and I could see how they would resonate in a way. in the space that you've created, and how they would have emotions that I will then have to deal with.
Yeah.
Is it like a pack that they get?
Yes. Yeah. They get. I don't have the details of the pack with me, but like they do get like teaching materials and sort of kind of like a duty of care sort of kind of pack. I mean, it is basically the way that it works. It is up to the teachers to then, they're not, no one from the museum is there sort of kind of supervising it, and it is very much a sort of kind of hired. And we do have, I think we've got a brochure for it, and in Arts A, which kind of lays out exactly kind of what's involved. So if you wanted to hire it and stuff like that as an educator, that's sort of kind of very much happening. It's happening in the US, but actually we have been asked to create European trunks so we can help facilitate that in the UK and in Europe as well. Yeah.
We have a project that works with pupils.
Yeah.
It's the Library of Lost Books, and the interest is there once you get to the people, once they know about it. It's quite good to have something different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the pieces as well, like you haven't seen the pieces, but the pieces are fairly gentle in their approach. We don't go to concentration camps, and it's not because the stories just didn't demand it. Like Marion's mother does go to Auschwitz and is murdered, and it is painful, but we don't go there. It's very much from the perspective of Marion, who was a child at the time and separated. So we try to make them emotionally impactful, but not traumatic, in a sense of like we don't want to make them overtly upsetting. So I feel, you should see them and see what you think, but I feel like, I definitely needs to be some duty of care though in terms of like, your audience anyway. And that's the same at film festivals as well, a lot of people come out very kind of upset, so it's emotional at least, so it will be even more so in the classroom, I would have thought.
Okay, and then hand over to Travis, been patiently waiting in the
Hi, I'm Travis.
Hi.
From Travis Lipke Memorial League. It's a great presentation, great work you're doing. I was wondering, as a practitioner, have you encountered the situation that we have in museums when you usually work with groups, okay, rather than with individuals? And it's nice to have those nice rooms with 6 seats or something. But what do you do when you have 20-something kids at your doorstep? So I was wondering about the out-of-house experience. Do you have any experience with that?
Well, the museum themselves curate around lots of exhibitions. For us, like throughput, the idea of throughput in VR is quite a kind of hot topic. In that throughput is like how many people can do the VR in one go. So in that VR gallery that they have, it's 8 seats. That's how they designed it. As I said, they would probably do it very differently. At the moment in the Barbican, we're doing 24 people an hour. That can go up to 40 people an hour. There are VR shows that are happening in the UK and in Europe where it's like 100 people an hour, doing things like experience of like the pyramids or something like that. The more people that you do, the different the VR is going to be, the more sort of accessible it is, and maybe the less immersive it becomes. But there's no reason with the 360 versions of those films that you couldn't do 25, 30 people now in a sort of a synchronized sort of VR cinema setup. So what we have here is only 4 seats because that's just the space here, but it's synchronized. So everybody can put it on, you can just press a button and it will all start playing. But that's for 4 people, that could be 30 people, that could be 50 people. As long as it's so in terms of that idea of like groups, then groups are very much something that you can do as long as you've kind of, if you're saying on the out when you're making it, that's what we want to do, then that's easy to achieve. In terms of curation and exhibition, as a production company, when we exhibit stuff, we have an idea of what we feel the process should be. The onboarding, we have a beginning, a middle, and the end. So the onboarding is setting the scene, art direction, having materials that engage, that bring you into the, I guess, the environment and the story world. At the Illinois Holocaust Museum, everyone sits down and watches this orientation film. If it's Rhodey's story or Marion's story, you'll see this film. It's about 5 minutes long, and it tells you a little bit of background about her. It's very gentle. Then you go into the VR. Then when you come out, you go and engage with more material. So there is that onward journey, and that's really, really important. As I think I mentioned when we first started making VR, it was very much a sidebar. You go to a film festival, you'd be like, there's the film festival and there's the VR bit, which is like on a table over there, and people would do emotional VR and then walk off into the light, go get a coffee, and it wasn't, we're very much against that. It has to be a holistic sort of design. Whether it's us designing it or our client designing it. In the case of the museum, they create installations and all the time, so we work with them on that. When we went to South by Southwest, though, we designed it, and when we went to the Wales Millennium Centre, you saw that fly-through. That was our designer doing that. Again, it can be big or large, small, or small or large. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you have a question in the middle, and
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Rachel. I'm from the Claims Conference. Clarissa, we do fund all kinds of new media.
Yes.
Oh, we'll work on a grant then. Yeah.
I was wondering what your thoughts are with having the remote, the controllers, versus not.
I think when it came to this piece, like I do lots of interactive VR, and I love interactive VR. Like, it's great, and it really, when you engage with an interaction that's well designed, it can foster learning. And we have this piece again at the Barbican, which is about rave culture, and there's a scene when you're in a police station and you're picking up these people, interviews, and you're putting them on a board and you're putting together the picture of like acid house music and how all the people that were involved. When it came to this piece, obviously I mentioned earlier that the museum were reticent about that because of the onboarding and the teaching of it. And when we onboard in the Barbican, it does take some time, 5 to 10 minutes to get everyone suited up, ready to go. I think on an ethical standpoint, I was slightly reticent about what interactions would mean, because when you create an interaction, you're saying, well, why am I doing this thing? What does it say? What does the action say about me as the person within the experience and my perspective, and who am I in this experience? If I'm not an observer, if I'm an active participant, I think you need to interrogate that and understand the ramifications of creating an interaction. Doesn't mean that interactions are off the table. What we did with these pieces, there are some interactive elements that don't involve controllers. So there's a scene in Walk to Westerbork, which I think is the best example, where you are behind the characters that are walking down a dark lane, hand in hand, on being marched to Westerbork internment camp, and it's dark at night. And your head has a torch, and you're able to kind of look around. And that torch is interactive. It doesn't involve controllers. So we did look for ways of creating interactivity that didn't involve controllers, and there are different ways of doing that. In the scene in the back of the truck when Marion's hiding, you can see your breath. And it's kind of like, and it wasn't at one point we were going to make it interactive, so we would actually like have something here so it could measure your breathing and you could see your breath, and it's a cold night, kind of thing. But actually we ended up not doing that, but people symbiotically sort of kind of start to match breathing, and it becomes and people are like, oh, I could see my breath, and it's like, so you play on these kind of little tricks to create kind of these immersive moments that feel that they have agency. It's not to say that if we did a different project that we wouldn't look at it and create interactivity. I think interactivity works best when it rewards natural inquisitiveness. It might be opening a suitcase. It might be looking in a passport. It might be like piecing the idea of a story together. But again, I think the process of designing it is a really interesting one, and it is very much sort of kind of. I think the key word is interrogation. You have to interrogate why you're doing it and what it means. And if you can answer those and you can satisfy those, then it's a good thing to do. I would just say, in terms of controllers, I mean, we have controllers in this other piece at the Barbican, and it's just the triggers you use. You don't use the buttons, you don't use the joystick unless you're moving, unless you have to teleport and you're not walking around. But so it's just to pick stuff up. So it's a very easy interaction. I'm just like, pick stuff up, put stuff down. And so, but you can do it, so you can do interactions where you waft your hand across something and it opens. There's all sorts of different ways of doing it. So I love interactions. It just for this piece, it was just not where we wanted to go.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got our next question coming just from you.
Hi, I'm Elisa from Radboud University. And my question kind of builds a lot on what you were just talking about, who the viewer is in the scene. And I'm curious about how you decided on what the perspective is of the viewer, and maybe in discussions with the museum. And do you know if people then afterwards also reflect on their position within the experience?
I think, I as a director in this space, I like to play with perspective. I think it's one of the sort of interesting sort of gifts of the medium. So in these films, you do oscillate between being sort of a witness, being somebody that's, especially in 360 video, where you are sort of standing, you're looking around, maybe you're in front of the survivor who's talking to you, so you are, like when Marion says, this is the place where I last saw my mother, and you're standing there. So you are bearing witness to her story. Other times, especially as these are childhood memories, you are sort of in those positions and sort of kind of sitting in places where it becomes evident that the perspective has changed, and it is a sort of almost a retelling of events, a reconstruction of events where you are placed in the perspective of either Marion or somebody in that scene. And I think actually it can work quite sort of gently. It doesn't have to be. It might sound to you like that's quite jarring, but I think in the execution of it, it's quite gentle, and people go, "Oh, okay, that was really nice when I was there." I think the impact of feeling as if you are that person in that person's shoes for a moment is quite impactful. Again, it's important not to kind of like over dramatize it or sensationalize it. Like you don't want to do something that would be traumatic or anything like that. But I think just being placed in that perspective gives people allows them an extra dimension in terms of understanding the narrative. And so, it's interesting to play with that.
Okay, I'm going to go to Simone at the back and then Esther.
Hi, I'm Simone from Royal Holloway. I will sign up for these films.
Cool. From Royal Holloway?
Yes, yeah. So I was interested in really the survivors and the survivors' perspective. I guess, many of them have told their stories, have been interviewed and written books, and how they felt about the representation of this new truth. And it's an extension or amplification of what they've already written about, and also they're becoming, characters retelling this drama, but going back possibly for the first time to many of these places. And I guess, how did they feel as though these virtual reality spaces, when they saw it, how they felt that their stories were extended or reinforced? Because what you've been saying is that, people come away with an emotional response, but, as historians, we still want the historical record to be intact and not to paralyze. For me, these stories would be excellent at the end of a teaching unit, or looking at, Shanghai, Westerbork, Drancy, and to unpack the archival, the juxtapositions of the layers that you're doing. So really, it's really about the survivors and how they felt about this truth, which I think these imaginings that you did, which is really quite incredible. And then my other question was about Shanghai, really as a multi-ethnic, multicultural destination, and really one of the most unique places where refugees went in the late 1930s. But when you went back there, how was the kind of Chinese, the Asian experience represented. I'm wondering about the commission from the Illinois Holocaust Museum and what they wanted you to kind of do, because this was a kind of transit space and site, but it was very intermingled and was quite unlike those other two spaces. So I'm just wondering how you kind of address those two.
So the first question was, survivors. Well, I think we met the survivors at the very beginning of the process. It was the first time we went to Chicago and went around the museum. That was the beginning, and then we met the survivors, and obviously they were very keen to tell these stories. We pored over the archive. I read Marian's book. We talked about the other, and they do a lot of storytelling work, education work with the museum. So we're very much engaged with the museum already, and very keen to make these pieces. For differing reasons, Marian was really to honour her mother. For Rhodey, it was because she felt that the Dutch Jew experience was underrepresented, and she wanted that story to be there. For Doris, it was because the Shanghai experience is also underrepresented. So I think they were all very sort of keen to get those stories out. When it comes to the sort of treatment of them and how they felt about it, I mean, they've only said really, really nice things. I think what's interesting, and we get this at VR a lot, when people say, oh, how do you collaborate with the survivors? Is it a collaborative process? Now, we collaborated with the museum, obviously, and we did collaborate with the ladies in terms of like the interviews and taking them on the shoots and stuff like that. But the reality is that they don't necessarily understand exactly the form and the medium that it's going to, and a lot of times it's like when they're watching those pieces, it's them putting on a headset for the first time. And they're like, oh, this is like, it's quite a lot, really. And I think it's probably unrealistic to really explain the ins and outs of the technical process. There was a lot of reimagining and metaphorical sort of work that's done artistically. These are historical pieces in the sense that they are testimony driven, and they use archive and they recount a personal story, but they do use artistic license to create, there's a scene in one bit where she's talking about her and this family. She's recounting them going to a farm when D-Day happened, and and all the leaflets are being dropped, and that scene is set in this farm without a roof, and all the leaflets are falling through. It's a completely metaphorical imagined space, but it works with the testimony, which is the personal truth that anchors the whole way through. So they felt like it was very representative of how they felt and how their story unfolded, if not like specifically historically accurate to like what that looked like or what that did. And I think, in terms of when you're dealing with people's memories, and you're talking like, the scene where it's, the animation scene that you saw where it's very sort of removed, a lot of negative space, like sketch. The reason for that is obviously it was, we could have filmed in the space that it happened. Because we went to that. We didn't actually go inside in the end because and it felt like, but you'd be going into a space that was modern space, and actually the metaphorical space felt closer to the memory, and it was a childhood memory of something very painful that happened 80 years ago. So in a sense that the fragmentation of that recall and the emotional the bits that are emotionally seared into her memory are the important bits, and that's how we represented that. So, it is artistically sort of kind of like, it is something that we approach in that way. But we obviously don't seek to misrepresent any of that. I think they're very, very pleased. I mean, what it ended up doing was got them to talk more to people. For them, it was like especially at the film festivals, it was the occasion where they could go and talk directly to people, and that's really, really important to them. So yeah, that's how they felt. What was the other question? Shanghai. Shanghai was an interesting one because, I mean, we didn't know anything about Shanghai when we first started it. So, you know, we had to research. And also, when we filmed in Shanghai, we didn't film in Shanghai because it was, because COVID restrictions were still really, really bad. So we had to hire a local crew and direct them remotely, which was really, really difficult. So we created a lot of those spaces, but we kind of, you know, we're navigating around the former sort of kind of slum, basically, and got that footage back and then constructed it. I think that in a sense that was disappointing because in that story it would have been way better if we had been able to go there. It's what's interesting is that obviously like there is a lot of VR festivals and things in China. China's really involved in VR. They have their own, you know, they have their own industry there. It's very successful. We spoke to a distributor in China about these pieces and they didn't want to take them. And I would have thought, you know, well, this is a really good story about China. It's, you know, they saved this population. They've resisted, they were generous. But actually, they didn't want to know that there was a slum, a kind of like ghettoized sort of kind of slum in Shanghai. That was the feedback that we'd got from the distributor, that was like they didn't want to acknowledge that.
And then there's the Shanghai Jewish Refugees Museum as well, which could be an alternative.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but that was just the feedback that we got from that distributor. I think it would be great. I mean, as I said, like as a production company, we're not the distribution experts necessarily, like, or we don't have the resources to also basically go to all the museums around the world and show it. Like it's expensive. That's why we go to the film festivals and hope they come to us. So, you know, but if there are any places that you think would take these pieces, like this is one of the reasons that we're here, like, you know, overtly, like we want people to engage with them. We want people to speak to the Illinois Holocaust Museum about potentially licensing them because they're good pieces. And, you know, you are the experts in this field. Like we're the experts at VR, but we're not the experts in you know, in some of this. So we hope that come and see us afterwards and say, hey, speak to this person and we'll do it. Cool,
okay.
Thank you.
We have the luxury of running over slightly because ours was a short session, so we're going to exercise on into that. And I'm going to pass over to
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for your presentation.
Yeah.
It's really a fascinating project. My name is Esther. I'm from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and I research new paradigms in Holocaust education. So my question goes a little bit towards that direction. And I was wondering if the museum had an educational concept or some like guidelines, restrictions, something that they gave you that you had to deal with, and if so, how did you negotiate that process with the ideas that the museum had vis-a-vis the technology that you were using, and also the ethnographical ideas that you had yourself and the storytelling, basically, and I'm asking also a little bit towards the direction. I mean, I'm wondering if our educational ideas that we have until now, if we're still able to implement them into this technology, or if the technology is breaking out in some way, or if there's some kind of like a challenge towards the educational paradigms that we had so far. Like, and I was just concerning this very practical example that you were giving, asking myself if there was any ideas that you weren't able or were easily able to implement into the film.
I'll try and answer that. That's kind of not, it's not really like my expertise, but they didn't give us any specific educational sort of paradigms to work towards. They had themes that they wanted to explore, resilience. They had this term called upstanders. I don't know. I mean, it wasn't a term I had heard before, but it was about like these pieces of work wanting to highlight the role of upstanders, people that had intervened, because I think one of their things at that Illinois Holocaust Museum they like to teach is like positive action, trying to influence young people to stand up and to do something and to show examples of that. that was one of the main things that they did say. But really, I think they came to us more because of the quality of the work in a cinematic sense, because of, I didn't set out to make necessarily education or edutainment. We set out to make the best cinematically sort of beautiful pieces that we could, in the hope that they would, I guess, emotionally resonate. And that seemed to be a very natural sort of kind of like process with them. The fact that they have gone into schools in those VR trunks, that kind of happened after we'd finished. That was part of their process. We're really pleased that that's happened, but we haven't been involved in the educational materials. We simply sort of kind of made the films in that sense. But so that was, that's very much their domain. And I think, unfortunately Kelly's not here. I mean, Kelly will be able to answer that very, very well. But I would say that, she's somebody that you should contact, that everyone, if they're interested, should contact. She's a great, fantastically open and positive person, and knows that I'm doing, sitting here talking about these pieces, because I've been emailing her going, give me some statistics. But she would be very open to sharing that process, I'm sure. But yeah, they didn't really put that on us in terms of that. Yeah.
Okay, okay. If you're happy to keep going, yeah, we've got a couple more questions.
Yeah, need a coffee though.
Hi, Darren.
Hi.
Sorry for torturing you.
No, it's okay, it's okay.
I'm Andres, I'm from Noon Films. We actually are on the production side as well, and we're starting in the immersive field, so it's really nice to get some of the insight into how you guys work. I really appreciate that.
Cool.
I was curious on two sides. One was on the pre-production side, or early stages, when you were talking about doing the interview and using it almost just using the audio as the base to see if the story is working. At that stage, are you already thinking about interactivity? Are you placing that into your timeline? Or are you just thinking story at that?
I would say mainly story. I think we would have an idea at that point, like what scenes, especially in this project, like what scenes were going to be filmed, and what scenes wouldn't be possible to be filmed. But I think, and we do that through like kind of research, just talking to people and stuff like that. You get, like I came away from the first meeting with Marion. I directed Letters from Drancy. It's just to say that the other two were directed by two other directors that we hired because they were all being made at the same time. So with Letters from Drancy, the first meeting with Marion, there was a lot of information, and she had this book which was fantastic because it had a lot of visual ideas in it. She talked about dreams and nightmares that she had that we so it's a kind of almost, her writing was quite kind of imaginary and metaphorical and had some abstraction in it. So it was great for a filmmaker to go, oh, that's a really interesting image, Like the piece starts actually in a mirror. We built a mirror prism, because one of her nightmares was that she has this recurring nightmare that she's in a room full of mirrors and she's in a night dress, and there's a guard there, a Nazi guard there, and she can't escape him. And this is something that she had in Paris, because she felt like every time she came out the metro, there would be somebody there. So we kind of start with that. And I was quite worried about that, actually, because it was quite a bold thing to go for. And the museum, actually, and I did ask the museum, like, is this too much? And was it too on the nose? And they were like, no, like, actually, it's really good to see the perpetrator, like, as in, like, to visualize that, and not to be like, oh, the Nazis are this thing, like, we don't see, but like actually to see a young soldier and stuff like that. So anyway, like, to get back to your point, there were certain things in the story that were clearly like, okay, we're going to build those. But then the interview process is really where it comes out, and I feel like that then shapes the narrative. Then you start to really think, okay, I'm going to go from here, and this is how I'm going to get to here. This is how, and that, transitions in VR are really important. How you transition from a scene maybe where you're first person, as we were talking earlier, into a third person perspective or a witness perspective, or go from video into animation or something like that, and how that's going to work. So actually, one of the things we might start doing on that audio is start to soundtrack it. and kind of find that flow really of story, and then that kind of gives you ideas about how you might visualize the visual flow and the visual transition as well. So yeah, for me, that's super important.
Okay, we probably have time for one more question. So I'm just gonna get you.
Hi Darren, I'm Daniel.
Hey Daniel.
I'm a computer scientist from Munich. I've been working in a VR lab for the past 7.5 years or so. So I have a computer scientist question for you and a very annoying computer scientist remark because I want to push back on terminology a bit.
Yeah, go on.
But the first thing is just the evaluation. We have, I think, a lack of empirical data here in whenever we're going for digital formats in Holocaust commemoration and teaching and education. So I was wondering, would you know whether the museum has published this evaluation, this study somewhere as a white paper or a grey paper?
I don't think they have, no.
They
No.
didn't.
No.
In terms of implementation in classroom, one of my colleagues at the University of Connecticut is, yes,
Yeah.
you got him, okay.
I mean, I think they will. This is the first year that they've been doing it, so I think the gathering of the data is still happening. I think it takes a little bit of time to then sort of get the evaluation and then publish. But I believe that that's something that they are going to be doing for sure.
The funny thing is because I'm in contact with him and he's kind of about to send me this data to analyze.
Right. Okay.
So that's kind of answers my question, though. Okay.
You're in contact with who? Kelly?
No, with Anna Marcus.
At the university, implementing it in the classroom, and he's collecting data at the University of Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
With
Sorry.
our middle school.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I was talking about Illinois. Sorry.
Sorry, but it is the Illinois Holocaust.
Oh, okay.
He got the data from them.
Yeah, the annoying terminology question.
Go on, terminology.
Yeah. On an academic level, I understand, and
I'm not an academic, by the way.
I know, which is why I'm kind of specifying that.
Yeah.
And it is kind of implied in your talk already, and I don't blame you because you were given this context from the museum side, but on a very strictly academic level, an immersive video is not VR, and VR is not an immersive video. You touched on that with the 3 degrees of freedom and the 6 degrees of freedom.
Well, that's a matter of opinion, actually. The term immersive video can mean 180.
The thing is about the interactivity, which is not...
Actually, that depends how you define VR. And if you're defining it yourself, well, academically...
Would you accept filmic VR if we want to distinguish?
This piece, though, is built in Unity. So even the 360 video exists within a Unity, not the ones that are shown here, because that is a 360 video version. Yeah. But it's the 360 video is playing within a Unity, and there are elements sometimes where there is interactivity on top of the video. Yeah. Still have 3 degrees of freedom, but. I would say I still believe 360 video is virtual reality. You might call it immersive video, but then I call immersive video is a catch-all term for sort of, it could be 3D, it could be 180 degrees, like the Apple Vision Pro.
Also less versed on the immersive video side, so that might not be the right terminology. I'm just very invested in the VR side, and it's a bit difficult when all the terms get muddied together to really understand what is...
Yeah, but would you argue then that something built in game engine without interactivity is not VR?
Yeah.
Well, so it needs to have interactivity.
Yeah, it is a prerequisite.
I don't believe that's true.
That is perfectly fine. It's just for me on an academic level.
Just to say, this is exactly why we're holding this space right now. These are the conversations.
I'm also not claiming that you are wrong in any way.
No.
It's about if somebody were to publish a paper and claim, for example, we did something in VR and not digging up what VR is.
Yeah, but VR has lots of different affordances. You don't have to... It'd be like saying, if it doesn't have spatial audio, then it's not VR, or if it doesn't have this, it's not VR. That to me, that doesn't make sense, and that's reductive, I think. I think it's not... Especially trying to define something that is nascent and developing. It's like the classic thing, like at the beginning, 10 years ago, where people said, oh, you can't move the camera, you can't do this, you can't do that. That's not VR, this is VR. I don't think we're at that point. And I don't think academically we should be at that point. I think we're still discovering what these things are. And I don't believe that just purely interactivity, which, you know, in terms of interactivity, what do you define interactivity as?
Sure, yeah. There's also something it can go for, but...
You know, is haptics part of it? Is, you know,
yeah,
like...
It is a continuum of...
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, we should get coffee and debate that.
To carry on outside. So thank you again, Darren.